Before we continue this video, I just want to say thank you, Dashlane, for sponsoring this video. More on that later. You know, there's one misconception that I hate on the internet. They always think that PMs don't do anything or that they don't add value. So what do you say about that?
I think it's hard because I think like there are certain roles where it's you don't necessarily need a PM. If it's purely like technical, it's like sometimes a PM doesn't add any value there. But I think working is like kind of the central point across all these different like product functions and helping unblock. In general, like being a PM, the day-to-day PM role is not like glamorous, right? It's a lot of unblocking, a lot of escalating to other people, a lot of getting people to do things and managing the project itself. Like the day-to-day aspects of it are. So like not having someone to help do that is one, challenging for everyone to get their job done. Two, it's like I think having a vision, having someone spend time thinking about the overall strategy and not saying like, okay, we only care about building this one feature, but how do these sets of features like actually manifest itself into like a product that actually is something that's special. Is like very hard to do when you're just focusing on a very local problem.
Right.
And so you need like someone to look at the problem holistically, to help manage the pieces, help break it up and set timelines, and they get like kind of the work all done. Otherwise, you've seen it other companies like there are other companies out there that don't necessarily have PMs and it's really engineering driven. And the problem is that I've heard from other friends who work at those companies is that you want to build the really cool features and the really, really like flashy stuff that like you would want to use, but no one else outside of you or that company would want to ever use that. And so you build really cool features, but no one wants to use them. And so it's honestly around like how do you build features and how do you get someone that understands what the users actually want.
So you also mentioned like product vision, like this. That's pretty important because you can't just focus on execution.
Yep.
But how do you even get better at product vision since you usually only vision a few times?
Yeah. No,
job, right?
I think you're always thinking about it.
Okay, you're always thinking about it.
But I think it's a really deeply understanding. Like, in order to get real product intuition, you have to deeply understand what the user problem or customer problem is.
I see.
And that's either doing research or utilizing data and asking the questions that you need. I think those are the feedback loops that tell you like, and reading market research or looking at trends. I think it's like that's where it gives you a vision of like, this is where the market is headed, or this is where people are having trouble. And that helps like craft like, this is like on videos, right? Like that means like discovery might be really hard, or people don't have sets of controls, right? And so in that case, like you have to really understand all these external signals to help build that intuition.
Yeah. Thanks for debunking this misconception. It seems like it's a very messy job and you're trying to make things unmessy all the time. Yeah. So because it's so messy to like unblock people and do all that crap, like what would make your job easier for different functions? Like as a software engineer, how can I make your job easier? As a data scientist, how can I make your job easier?
Yeah. I think it's all about just setting like timelines and deliverables. Like if you say, if we need this piece of analysis and you can estimate it correctly to say, I'll have it done by the end of the week, it helps plan things. Because it's a chain, it's a chain reaction, right? Someone does an analysis, you have recommendations, you then work with design to help like scope them out. They tell you some deadline and then engineering can work on it. And so at that point, if like those deadlines are not actually like accurate, then it postpones everything and it pushes things out. And so it's all about just like getting the proper estimation and chunking it out into the right set of milestones to make sure you continue to make progress.
Right. So being good at estimating how long it will take certain things.
Yeah.
Right. So do you prefer if someone overestimates how long it is or underestimates?
I mean, it's always under promise, over deliver. So that's a good mod. It's always one thing that you should keep in the back of your mind.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't very good at estimating when things would be done.
It's not necessarily just like estimating up front how long it is. It's just like if you get 3 days into a 7-day analysis and you say, it's going to take longer, just telling people that like, this is actually going to slip a little bit. And so then you can plan.
That's true. Okay. So what about PMs? How are they evaluated then? Because it might be kind of hard because some products are easier than others.
Yep.
For example, if the product is already booming versus a product that's crap.
Yeah, I think it's a couple ways. I think you can do it one on like the product strategy that you have. Like, did you set the right vision? And it may not necessarily be that like you succeeded, but it's also if you failed, like did you learn why you failed? That can help iterate on your product strategy coming up. So it's not just, you don't get rewarded just for succeeding. You can actually get rewarded for failing, but failing in the right way. So you had the right hypotheses, did all the research, what you built just didn't work out, and then you learn for why it didn't work out. That makes your product stronger.
Nice.
That's one. The second one is like pure execution, right? It's like, did you execute on what you were going to say you were going to do? Like if you have 6 months and you have to build something in 6 months, did you actually build it and ship it in 6 months? And the last one is more like kind of cross-functional. It's like, were you able to motivate your team? Did they like working with you? Were you able to unblock them? And how was your relationship with like other teams outside of your core team? And like, were you able to get like a lot more out of other people? And did they like doing it?
I see. Do you think the skills to pass the interview as a PM are the same as the skills to be a good PM? Because I feel like for software, that's not true.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think in software, it's like, I think you have to pass some bar, artificial bar, like you have to know how to do all these recursion problems, but like in theory, you never do it ever or all these algorithm problems, you never do it in theory and practice in software engineering. I think in product, it actually gives you a good signal on like, can you take an ambiguous problem and like break it down? If you have a really ambiguous problem and you're not able to put a framework in place to analyze it, it's gonna be really, really hard to be successful. You can learn it for sure. And then if you can't like have fluidity with some data and saying, here's a hypothesis of why something's down and say, here's how I would prove it, like you're gonna struggle. Like I'm not saying it's not learnable. I think it's just like, there's effort that you can put up front to problem solve and to learn and to say like, here's how I would think of stuff. That definitely helps. So I would say it's definitely a more fair. I think the one thing that isn't necessarily super fair, being someone that's like young, is like experience. Like the fact that people are looking for more experienced people, like in a role, like if you have 2 more years of experience, like, and people don't take you for that role, or 2 years less of experience for someone else, like, and what they say is like, oh, you don't have enough experience to be in this role. I think that's a little bit more of a cop out, because it's just a matter of like, how does this person have the right set of skills? Like not necessarily if experience matters.
That's true. So for you, especially during your time at Facebook, what skills do you think were most important to your success?
I think at Facebook, it's a lot of just communication, like over communicating. Realize when you work on your team itself, like people understand all the context for why you're doing things, and you don't need to like, you can get really into details. But if you take a step up and look at your manager's manager, or other teams, they lack all like the individual details. And so it's like keeping those people informed to say, you're working on this is why you're working on it, makes your life way easier. So I think that's like one of the biggest skills you've learned, especially at a big company, is like, how do you manage like outside of your core team? Because at a small startup, it's easy because everyone knows what you're working on. You have finite resources, like everyone in the company knows exactly the problems that you're working on. Whereas a bigger company, it's like people are working on so many different things, it's hard.
So communication matters a lot. What do you hate most about being a PM?
I think it's hard. I think there's a lot of unflattering things you have to do as a PM. Like you have to like over communicating, you have to unblock, and having to like step through politics and people's incentives is kind of, you're all on the same team, and the fact that people sometimes have differing agendas is really difficult, because you have to find why, you have to understand it, and then sometimes like it comes to a head if those things are not like aligned. And so in that case, it's just like there's a lot of unnecessary roadblocks for you to do something that you want to do and that like everyone's agreed to. I think that's like pretty frustrating because it's inefficient.
Can you give me an example of what office politics actually are? Because on my previous video, I said something about office politics for data science, and a lot of people mistook me thinking that I hate office politics, but that is not true. I think office politics are great, but I just wish I was better at it, right? Like, I think it's great. Like, I watch Billions, there's a bunch of office politics.
Doesn't look good. It's not great.
But it's so juicy. Like, I like it. So anyways, can you give me an example of what office politics actually look like in real life?
Yeah, I think it just means, it's less like contentious is what people think. I think it just means like you're working with a team that's not your team, right? They have different goals. And like they have different incentives. Like if you're on that team, like you have a goal that you want to hit, and like you're not willing to work with another team because it doesn't help you hit that goal. And so why would you ever want to do that, right? And so it's more of like, how are teams aligned and structured to make sure like you can reduce that, because like that's just inherent. People are always going to be like, oh, I'm looking out for my team. Like if that's not the case, if like you can't help my team, like why would I work? But as in general, you're part of the same company, so like you have to understand where they're coming from.
Cool.
Nothing really juicy. So
right, exactly. It's not crazy like
it's
backstabbing,
just basic human nature,
just like like it's fair.
It's fair.
It's usually fair,
and people come from the right place.
So I just want to take a second here to talk to you guys about Dashlane. Dashlane has been a huge time saver for me. So as you know, I buy a lot of shit, so I hate entering my password and my credit card information every single time. And now with Dashlane, I don't have to, because every time there's an online form, it just fills everything out automatically, saving me tons of time. And it keeps everything secured. Plus, if any of your personal information gets leaked in the dark web, Dashlane will alert you, because they are actively monitoring the darknet for you. When you do see your passwords get leaked, all you have to do is press one single button and it will change all your passwords for you. You know, I used to have one password for everything I use, all the apps, all the websites, which is kind of dumb. But now I take my security pretty seriously. They also have a VPN so you can access content everywhere and prevent prying advertisers' eyes. Just joking. But seriously, if you're interested, you can get it for free on your first device if you go on dashlane.com/Joma. And for my viewers, you can get 10% off premium if you want to use the VPN or the dark web monitoring. Now, that's pretty cool. All right, that's pretty much it. All right, do you have any tips for people who want to transition into PM? I know we talked about that a little bit, but just like more concretely.
Yeah, I think like in general, it's like just continue to be thinking about like products, right? Like products that you use, whether it's like an iPhone, a watch, like even not, it doesn't have to be actually like an electronic product. Right. It can be anything. And he's like, okay, how would I make this better? And then just like breaking it down in your head, like, who would use it? Why would they want to use it? Where does this break down? What are the things that I can build that make this better? I think it just helps you like really think about like a framework, right? And then I think like just like understanding more of like developing hypotheses of like why you think something's the case and trying to like prove or disprove it. So that help you like develop like the critical thinking. I think understanding data in general is definitely helpful. Like being able to learn to write your own queries, like it's though not necessary, like it's just helpful to understand like how the things are done. And if you need to, you can do it yourself. And then I actually think it's just like mostly just like curiosity and just the ability to like really want to dive deep in a product. Like for example, I was never a software engineer. I didn't know anything about APIs. I didn't know anything about developers, platforms, and what tools they build, but I worked for 3 years on building developer platforms, APIs, and like really technical solutions without knowing any of it to start. And after that, it's like you dive deep and you understand problems and you're like, okay, yeah, here's what the solution is, and you learn. And so it's all about like, how do you understand what the problem is, either the customer, the user, or the developer?
I guess what I meant more was concretely, did you use any resources to help you prep for product interviews?
I think the best way is like just to do as many mock interviews as you can.
How do you get those mock interviews?
I mean, if you know someone at a company, with your friends, like just ask your friend if you just like, give me this prompt, and then just like go through it as like, there's no substitute for like real experience. Like you think about it in your head, but actually having to communicate it and tell people is a much harder problem. And the second thing is just like making sure you understand how to communicate and like explain things. I think people think about, for example, I think about a lot of things in my head and it's like, I understand it, but communicating and proving to someone that you understand a problem is a much harder thing. But if you can do that, it tells them that you really can understand what the problem is. And so I just say like do a ton of like mock interviews with friends. Like there's some resources online. I didn't look at any, but there's some resources online that like really go into like what the types of things you should look at are. There's a lot of resources out there. I think other things that are helpful like is even if you just do basic like look at some basic consulting frameworks. Like I think it just helps because it understands like how people think about frameworks and breaking things down.
But those friends, they have to be in PM. Right? They have to be a PM, right? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard for some people who don't have PM friends.
Totally.
So, I mean, I guess you could read Cracking the PM Interview.
Yeah.
I read that. I didn't get the job, but I read that.
I think it's pretty straightforward. It's like, and a lot of companies will tell you like how to prep, and they'll give you resources to prep, and so you just do it and you go through it. I think a lot of times I see people when I do interviews like the resources are all there, but you obviously didn't read them. Right. And so like it's not rocket science to go through. This is just all about the structure and the framing that you have.
Let's go to like the personal stuff. More about you.
All right.
You know, so like why did you choose PM?
One, I wasn't good enough to be a software engineer. I was strictly mediocre.
But you wouldn't want.
But I think in general it was very interesting. Like for me, it's like it was really interesting to build things or to see like to write a couple lines of code and see something happen immediately. And I think that was like where it was like, oh, I don't want to work in like client services. I don't want to do other things. I don't want to do in sales, right? Because I want to go like actually build the things that like people use. And it's like I'm not a software engineer, like what are the types of things you can do, right? You can start a company, or you can work at like the product manager and own a product and build it from end to end and have a team working with you to build it as well. And so it was more around like, how do I see all these cool things in Silicon Valley, like outside of Silicon Valley, like how can I build something like that? And so it was more around like that type of mentality, and product gave me the best chance to do it.
Did you build anything when you were a kid or when you were a teenager?
I was actually super I thought I wanted to be like a mechanical engineer,
really?
Or like something like a material science or stuff like that. Or we had this class in high school where we built engines, we built like, we built like cosmic ray finders, and we were able to like kind of do really cool, build really cool things in a class. And I think that was just really fun to get experience building like mechanical stuff. But then I took a couple classes in college around like building web apps.
Oh, web apps.
And I thought it was really cool to just build something. And I think I went to Stanford, so like the first class you take is like CS 106A.
Oh, really? Anyone?
What?
Everyone has to take that?
I think 95.
Oh, 95.
It's optional, but 95% of the undergrad class now takes it.
Seriously? Wow.
My class was like 1,200 people.
Holy shit.
But the last project you build the projects you build are you build a brick breaker.
I can't believe you still do that. I can't believe you did that too, because I still see some people building that.
Yeah, it's a very common. It's a common problem. And the last one was to build a watered down version of Facebook.
Really?
Like it had the basic functionality of friend requests.
Wow.
From writing on things. And
that's first year.
Yeah. And so the ability that you can actually see that and build it, it was definitely a little bit, you got some of the starter packages for it, but like the fact that you were able to build it and see like, oh, my lines correspond to this stuff was really cool.
Wow. No wonder why Stanford's such a good school. Holy. All right. So a little bit more philosophical.
Yeah.
You know, what are you working towards in life?
Yeah, I think at my point, I definitely at some point want to like start a company or join something really small.
Right.
I think the problem I see a lot is like people start companies for the sake of starting companies because they think it's like a quick way to get rich. At the end of the day, like that's not going to happen. Like odds are so much against you that like the only way you're going to give yourself the best chance of succeeding is if you're really passionate about that area and willing to spend 10, 15 years like building it, even if it might fail, right? And so it's like I think the only way I would think about starting a company is like if I had enough conviction and motivation on a specific problem to solve it. Otherwise, like I think joining a company super small where like you help build the product from scratch, but not necessarily come up with the idea, is something that's really fascinating because it's like how do you bring something that's super small to scale and like hopefully grow it. So that's kind of where I want to go. I think I've learned some pretty good skills now in order to do it in the future.
Nice. Wow. Just a true builder you are. That's nice. But what kind of problems would you like to solve? Like, what are the areas that you care about?
Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens around just like getting people to use more things, right? Like, I mean, I work on products that do the same thing, right? But I think there's something around like some of the social good around like health, right? How do you make health more accessible and some of the more societal level problems that people are trying to tackle, but it's much trickier, right? Health is one, well-being.
Like, what do you care about?
No, that's what I care about. I want to see something. I want to see something that like makes an impact, right? Like in people's lives. If it's like money transfer to rural countries and making it easy for people to bank, right? Like I think that's something that you can just see impact of a product you're building. Like yes, you can build a product that's cool, but seeing people use it in a way that like actually changes their lives, like I think is something that I would love to do because it's more mission driven.
Cool. Yeah.
I think we're doing stuff around like sports is also super interesting. Like I think there's so much so much data out there to make like better decisions from like your sleep to your health to your performance that doesn't exist. So I think that's a really super interesting piece, as well as education. All these like things where people can like, you can actually see people have fundamental changes in like well-being is, I think, something that is interesting onward.
Nice. Yeah, just to make sure that your incentives are true. So if every job paid the same, what would you do?
Ooh.
If every single job paid the same. Like,
I think I'd want, like, personally, this is going to be out of left field, but I think I'd want to work in like the State Department.
The State Department?
In the government. I think it'd be really cool to be like work in foreign affairs and work like with kind of governmental policy across like foreign policy across like different parts of the world. I think it's hard to get into it. I think it's like the process of working in the government is like very antiquated, where it's just like there's no real good career trajectory. But I think that's like super interesting.
That's true. That's cool. So what about now? Like, what do you do outside of work? Let's not talk about work now. What do you do outside of work for fun?
I love being outdoors. I love like
I can tell.
being hiking. I love going hiking. I love going skiing. I love traveling.
Oh yeah.
Going to Japan in a couple days.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Dude, everyone's going to Japan. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. See ya.